In today's episode, voice as interface, when typing becomes obsolete. You're tuning into Human Architecture Assessment, a structural evaluation of how humans and the systems around us exist and their implications. I'm your host, JAPEXJESS. We don't just use interfaces, they use us back. Look at human postural alignment since the iPhone launched in 2007. Anterior pelvic tilt, forward head posture, the camel spine becoming the default. This isn't anecdotal. Biomechanical research shows that at a typical smartphone viewing angle of 45 to 60 degrees, the effective load on your spine reaches 49 to 60 pounds. For reference, your head weighs 10 to 12 pounds in neutral position. That's 5 times the natural load, sustained for hours every day. Source: Surgical Technology International, 2014. Now, a 2025 meta-analysis of over 10,000 participants found heavy smartphone users have more than double the risk of neck pain. And you can see the physical evidence walking down any street, sitting in any cafe. The device arrived and the human body rearranged around it. Smart homes promised liberation. There are now 21, approximately, Internet of Things connected devices per US household on average. Think about it. Your phone, TV, watch, probably a thermostat, speakers, lights. You're already there. But the interface remained an afterthought for years. We went from switches and knobs, physical, tactile, immediate, to apps and touchscreens layered over systems that still break in ways that require you to look at a screen to diagnose. The intelligence arrived. The interface friction didn't fully disappear. AI is changing that. Interface doesn't just change how we interact with technology. It changes the body doing the interacting. Posture, attention, cognition. The tool and the human negotiate. And the human doesn't always win. This has always been true. But what's different now is the pace. From the split keyboard and standing desks to kneeling chairs and ergonomic mice, the mechanical keyboard with the satisfying click. These weren't just tools, they were signals. A statement: I take this craft seriously enough to optimize for decades of use, not just today's output. There was a whole culture here. The type of keyboard you had spoke volumes. How your workspace was configured said something about how you thought about your body, your longevity, your relationship to the craft. The split keyboard wasn't just ergonomic. It was a philosophy made physical. But every ergonomic tool assumed your body was already in perfect alignment. The kneeling chair, the split keyboard, the lumbar support, all designed for an optimized human. None designed to get you from where you actually were to where they assume you'd be. The gaming chair is the perfect example. Ergonomically designed, every angle considered, adjustable everything. And yet, walk into any gaming setup, streaming space, the hunch is still there. Why? Because the chair was designed for a spine that gaming already destroyed. Posterior chain weakened, hip flexors tight. The chair assumes a posture the hobby made impossible to maintain. Still uncomfortable, not because the chair failed, but because the body sitting in it wasn't prepared for what the chair required. You arrived broken from the last tool. The new tool assumed you hadn't been. You purchased a product to add ease into your life, and instead, you're still uncomfortable. The body is still being asked to rearrange around the product. The negotiation never ended. It just got rebranded. Nobody talks about the transition costs. the remediation that has to happen before optimization is even accessible. Every new interface assumes a user that the previous interface hasn't yet damaged. The gap between the assumed human and the actual human, that's where people get hurt. Physically, cognitively, professionally. People are fed up looking down. That's not a feature request. That's a physical and psychological revolt. Voice isn't new. The microphone isn't the innovation. What changed is the intelligence behind it. For years, voice recognition required you to speak like the tool expected. Slow, clear, no accent, no deviation from what the model was trained on. It was yet another interface that assumed an ideal user. And the data proves how badly it failed everyone else. A landmark Stanford study found that all 5 major speech recognition systems had a word error rate of 35% for Black speakers, compared to 19% for white speakers, nearly double. Reference PNAS 2020. The tool wasn't neutral. It encoded a specific user as the standard, and everyone outside that profile paid the price. That changed in 2016. Microsoft crossed the human parity threshold, achieving 5.9% word error rate on conversational benchmarks, matching professional transcribers for the first time. From there, the gap closed fast. Today, there are 8.4 billion voice assistant units in active use globally, more than the world's population. Reference Statista 2025. Not because people were told to use voice, because it finally works for them specifically. That's the unlock. And physically, you look up, you move, you pace. The spine gets a chance to recalibrate. The interface that collapsed the body is giving way to one that might, if we're intentional about it, begin to restore it. The next step isn't a better screen, it's no screen. 2 categories worth distinguishing because they're doing different things. Voice first smart glasses. This has no heads-up display, no visual overlay, simply audio first, camera, AI companion built in. The interface is almost entirely voice, and in 2025, there were over 7 million units of this type sold, more than triple the prior 2 years combined. That's not a niche product. That's the early mass market. Compare that to full spatial computing headsets with AR overlay, starting at $3,500, still failing to catch on at scale. The market already voted. Voice first, lightweight, stays out of the way. That's what wins. Spatial overlay, not yet. Keyword yet. And the reason isn't complicated. Full immersion was never designed for how most people actually live. VR found its audience early. Gamers, training simulations, the bedridden, people whose context allowed them to check out of their environments entirely. But most people are parents. They need peripheral awareness. They need to hear what's happening in the next room. A device that asks you to disappear from your surroundings is asking something most people's lives won't permit. Voice first smart glasses won because they didn't make that ask. The interface adapted to the human. For the first time, the human won the negotiation. But the direction is clear. AR glasses with heads-up display are coming. And when that layer arrives, information spatially overlaid over reality with voice as a primary input, AI as the companion, this is the interface that stops being a destination you travel to. It becomes the world you're already in. You're on a hike. You turn your head, something catches your eye, perhaps a bird mid-flight, light hitting water a certain way. With one voice command, that moment is captured. You never left the moment, but you're able to document it. You're driving, an idea surfaces. You speak it to your glasses, for example. Your AI responds, and by the time you park, something exists that didn't before. That's not distraction. That's augmentation done right. This is the distinction from episode 1, Made Physical, using AI versus being used by AI. The interface serving the human experience instead of interrupting it. If you haven't listened to episode 1, go back. This is what that looks like in practice. The gap between thought and action narrows. The interface gets out of the way. Voice enters the IDE. AI agents are able to run commands, spin up processes, execute autonomously, and something fundamental shifts about what creation looks like. Not in the future, but now. Creating begins to rearrange itself around the human body. You pace, arms moving however they move. You speak your changes to the computer. Your monitor gives you the visual feedback. You see what's happening in real time while you move around. The keyboard is optional. The chair is optional. The posture that's been compressing your spine for decades is optional. The products already exist. Copilot Voice, Serenade, and open source voice to code available. This isn't a roadmap item. It's a transition in progress. What's slowing it down isn't the technology. It's the friction layer of letting go. The nostalgic click-clack of the keyboard. The feeling that if your fingers aren't moving, you're not really building. That's not a technical problem. That's identity. And in future iterations, a pair of AI glasses removes the last tether entirely. You walk through your home, the code is with you. You speak, it executes. The IDE follows you, not the other way around. This is vibe engineering, not a workflow hack, a fundamental inversion of the relationship between creation and the body doing the creating. Traditionally, sculpting starts with excess. A block of marble, a lump of clay. The sculptor moves, carves, chips, scrapes, until the vision inside is revealed. Michelangelo said the sculpture already existed inside the marble. His job was to remove everything that wasn't it. AI inverts this entirely. You start from nothing. From the ground up, you pour outward. The marble doesn't get uncovered. It manifests. And as if you're painting a sculpture to life, stroke by stroke, form emerging from absence. Not excavation, emanation. Resistance doesn't disappear. It relocates. When thought becomes execution, the constraint isn't the tool anymore. It's you. The quality of what gets created is now limited by the quality of what you can conceive, the richness of your sensory imagination, the depth of your inner world. Can you feel the texture of what you're building? Can you hear the sound design? Can you describe the weight of the air in a space, the temperature, the specific quality of light at 6 a.m. versus noon? That's not a philosophical question. It's a capability question, and it's becoming the only one that matters. The technology is already proving the direction. Neuralink's second patient controlled a cursor within 5 minutes of activation, later designing in CAD using brain signals alone. BrainGate published instantaneous voice synthesis directly from brain activity in 2025, with annotation control. Reference Nature 2025. And this one, brain controlled interface typing went from 8 words per minute in 2017 to 78 words per minute by 2023. The direction is not subtle. When thought becomes interface, what you bring to the creation moment is everything. The person who has paid attention to the world, who has let things land, who has been present for the experiences they had, brings more than someone who has only ever looked at screens. Not because they paid more, because they were actually there. Spatial experiences aren't luxury. They're training. They're how you build the raw material you'll pour into creation. Voice is the great eraser, and that cuts both ways. Here's where voice dissolves. Barriers. The written interface excluded people. Always has. If you can't read or write fluently, whether due to disability, language, or circumstance, the keyboard was never neutral. It was a gatekeeper. Voice removes that gate. Research shows 72% of adults with intellectual disabilities prefer voice as their primary input method. Reference OSCE 2018. The liberation is real and worth celebrating. But Gen Alpha is now reporting the highest rates of illiteracy of any generation in recent history. For the first time, an upcoming generation is performing worse than the one before it. In 2024, 40% of US fourth graders scored below basic in reading, the lowest in National Assessment of Educational Progress history. The Program of International Student Assessment recorded its largest ever global decline in reading scores in 2022. Reference OECD, December 2023. Researchers note the decline began around 2012, not 2020. The pandemic didn't start this. Screens did. The concern isn't that voice is bad. The concern is what we stop doing when voice handles everything. Reading builds neuroarchitecture that listening cannot. Neuroscience confirms that literacy acquisition creates circuits in the left visual cortex, the visual word form area, that simply don't exist in non-readers. Reference Nature Reviews Neuroscience 2015. Dr. Marian Wolf warns that this reading circuit took 6,000 years to develop culturally. It is plastic and it does erode. Writing is a thinking tool, not just a communication tool. It forces structure, argument, sequencing, the discipline of putting thought into words that hold up when examined. And the long-term cost of losing it is severe. Illiterate adults are nearly 3 times more likely to develop dementia than literate peers, independent of education level. Reference Neurology 2019. Voice is liberation for those the keyboard excluded, unambiguously real. Voice as the default that displaces literacy in those who could develop it, a cost worth naming. But here's what that framing misses. The time voice gives back is real. AI handles execution, with voice handling input, and in the hours that used to go to friction, you can read, you can write, you can grow the very capabilities the critics say voice will erode. The interface doesn't make that choice for you. You do. Literacy atrophying in the age of voice isn't inevitable. It's a decision made daily by people who have more time than ever to prevent it. The interface got out of the way. The screen is becoming optional. The keyboard is becoming optional. What remains is you. Financial resources open the door. Presence determines what you bring back through them. You can pay for access and still miss it entirely. Attention is the variable. Attention is what builds the inner world. The birds chirping in the wee bits of the morning. The squirrels communicating back. Ants collaborating, transporting a fly carcass. Oh, man. A reptile mid-shed, the subtle head bob. The fresh scent of greenery after rainfall. The nature walk isn't leisure, it's training. These aren't curated experiences. They're what's available when you're actually present. None of it requires a ticket. All of it requires you to actually be there. As creation becomes instantaneous, as the interface dissolves into lived experience, the new craft becomes the quality of your inner world. What you've noticed, what you've felt, what you've let land. That becomes your ceiling or your galaxy. That's it for this episode. And remember, people make excuses for what they want. What do your excuses reveal?